Hey guys, it's News here, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing my yearly ranking of Six Flags Great Adventures roller coasters from worst to best, all 14 of them. I say 14 because Flash has not opened in the 2024 season yet. It's not opening until 2025, so you will not be seeing Flash in this list since we haven't ridden it. But all the other coasters at Great Adventure will be in here, and you might be wondering, why are you doing another ranking video? The rides are still the same. But my opinions change constantly, so even this list that I have right now probably won't be the same a year from now. And that's the fun of it. I just want to give you guys my opinions on all the coasters, especially because this list is probably going to be pretty different next year for a variety of reasons. So let's get into it really quickly with last place, which of course is Little Devil. This ride has a really nice theme. That is probably my favorite thing about it. I remember back when this ride was not even like a thought really. They were putting Jersey Devil in, they had ripped Roadrunner Railway out and it was sitting in storage. And we were talking to the former park president, John Winkler, and we were like, hey, you know, you might as well take Roadrunner Railway and put it back next to Jersey Devil and call it Little Devil. I'm not trying to take credit for it, but not long after that, that is exactly what happened. And Little Devil reopened with its nice new theme, the new color scheme right next to Jersey Devil. Is a really, really nice little addition. But the coaster itself, it's a good coaster for kids. It's definitely like a good first coaster. This might have been my first coaster. It was either this or the one at Keansburg, so it does hold some sentimental value to me, but it's a kid's coaster. It's not going to be ranked very high. Following that, at number 13, we have Harley Quinn Crazy Train. This has always been a really fun ride to me because I rode it a lot as a little kid when it was called Blackbeard's Lost Treasure Train before Joker was a thing. And I've always loved the long trains on this ride. That's probably always been my favorite thing. The forces you get throughout the train vary so much because of the fact that you're going at completely different speeds through each element, depending on where you're sitting and what point of the ride it is, which I think is really, really cool. But the ride itself really isn't anything too special. It's a family coaster. It's a really good family coaster, honestly. There's a few of these around the world, but I don't mind that it's cloned because it is a family coaster, and it's a fun ride overall. Moving on to number 12, this might be a little surprising, we have Skull Mountain. I used to like this ride a lot more when it was themed a little differently. It wasn't what it is now. Now it's like the rave theme. I've barely ridden it this year because honestly, I really do not like the whole rave idea. I think it's just doesn't fit with what the ride is supposed to be. I'd much rather see them go back to its roots with all the actual like cave theming, because they have that established through the queue, and then you ride the ride and it's all like flashing lights, and it's not my thing. I still enjoy the ride. I definitely think it's starting to show its age a little bit, especially because the ride doesn't run as smooth or as fast as it used to, but that drop in the back row still is always a great element, and there's a couple weird transitions here and there that throw you out of your seat pretty good, so it is still a very thrilling ride, but I just think that the way it's themed currently, not really my favorite. Moving on to number 11, we have Dark Knight, the indoor Wild Mouse, and this ride, another one that's always held a pretty special place in my heart. This and Skull Mountain, I remember the first time I was able to ride them, because I believe they both have the same height requirement, and Skull Mountain really surprised me, scared me a little bit, but Dark Knight I liked a lot, also because I love the movie. Dark Knight is one of my favorite movies of all time, if not my favorite, and the theming on this ride, while definitely hasn't held up to the test of time that well, I do think it's still pretty effective in getting that Batman story across. There's tons of things throughout the ride, and they have the pre-show. It has actually been running on and off this year. Sometimes when you do catch it when it's on, it really does help enhance that experience. I hope they keep it on more often. But I love this ride. I love the fact that they still have it themed to the Dark Knight, which in my opinion is the best adaptation of Batman. And the ride itself, it's a standard Wild Mouse, but it's definitely one of the better ones. It's fairly smooth, runs pretty quick. Not really much to complain about with this one. Moving on to number 10, I'm probably going to get hated on in the comments for this one. It is Superman Ultimate Flight. Now, if you guys have watched the channel for a while, you know I really don't care for this ride very much. I think the only good part of it is that pretzel loop, and that pretzel loop is phenomenal. If the whole ride kept that intensity, this would be way higher on the list, but it doesn't. After the pretzel loop, the ride just meanders around and really doesn't do anything, and what doesn't really help its case either is the fact that I've ridden many other flying coasters. I've been on Tatsu at Magic Mountain, Manta down at SeaWorld Orlando, and its clone, the original Superman at Six Flags Over Georgia, and I actually prefer that one to this one by a long shot. It's profiled a little differently down there, and it works with the terrain, which I think makes the ride so much better. This one is just over a big flat plot of grass, which I think is kind of lame, and this always gets a crazy line. The general public loves this ride, which is good for me because I really don't like it that much. I love the pretzel loop, like I said, but everything else I don't really care much for. Moving on to number 9, we have the Joker. This is a ride that you can get a completely different ride on every single time. I've been tending to go on the purple side. I actually rode it a lot more this year than I did in years past because it was actually giving some really good rides. You get some crazy flips, get stuck upside down. That's always the best. When you get stuck upside down in one of those valleys, you get this crazy negative G sensation that is just awesome. And if you can get a good flipping sensation going, if you can move yourself a little with your legs, you're gonna have a really, really fun ride. The only reason it's not higher is because A, it's really short, and B, it's not consistent. I've had rides where it does absolutely nothing and just doesn't flip at all. Other rides where it flips you like crazy and you get all kinds of crazy forces. So that's why it's not that high, just because it's a little too inconsistent for me to place it any higher. Moving on to number 8, another one that might surprise you guys, it's Medusa. This is a really solid looping coaster. It's probably one of the more generic coasters at the park because there's a lot of other coasters at the park that do similar things to Medusa, but they have a gimmick to them. Medusa's biggest gimmick is that there's no floor, but I don't really think that's much of a gimmick. At the end of the day, it's just your standard looping coaster, and it does that really well. It's got a strong layout. It can tend to run pretty quick through that first half, especially when you're going through the Cobra Roll. You can really feel that speed. What I don't like, though, is how it dead stops on the mid-course. It's kind of a catch-22 because on one hand, it's really good because when you do dead stop, you get some great hang time through those corkscrews where you just pop right up out of your seat. But then everything else other than the corkscrews feels insanely slow, like there's something wrong that it shouldn't be going that slow. So I would rather just see them let it fly through the mid-course and then go through the layout because I would probably like it a lot better. You'd probably have a really nice, strong, positive G sensation on that helix going through all the building cutouts. I don't really know what they're supposed to be anymore because they rethemed it to Medusa and they didn't really do anything with those, so now they're just kind of painted orange. I'm surprised they didn't get rid of them, but Medusa overall is a fun ride. The fire has not been on at all this year, and that's another reason why it's not as high. I love the fire effect and not having it. Definitely feel its loss a little bit, but the lighting on it at night is really fun. If you can get a Fright Fest night ride, it's always a good time. But moving on to number 7, another surprising one, Runaway Mine Train. This ride is so much better than it has any right to be. It is just a blast when you get on it. My favorite seat is actually row 2 because for whatever reason, since you're sitting directly above the wheel, the airtime moments and all the wonky transitions, you feel them a lot more, and not in a painful way, in a way that kind of tosses you around a little bit. Like even some of the tamer elements on the ride, they feel much more exaggerated in that seat. And even when you ride in like the back or anything, you're gonna feel some really odd sensations. And this ride kind of feels like a mini Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point to me, in the sense that it has a lot of these crazy transitions that you're not gonna see on newer coasters that makes it feel a little janky, a little wonky, but it has this kind of charm to it, and that's what I really like. I've always been a huge fan of this mine train. It's one of my favorites out there, and I'm glad to see a lot more people recognizing that in its 50th season of all things. It's been running so well considering it is 50 years old. That is mind-blowing to me, but nothing will ever beat that grand finale the ride has where you drop down and go through that ridiculous airtime hill and then you glide over the lake. The airtime you get on that is just ridiculous. It is stupid that a mine train has that strong of force at the end of the ride. That is why it places so high. It has so many more strong forces than it should for a family coaster, but I see that as a very good thing. Moving on to number 6, we have Batman the Ride, a ride that's always been just very consistent, super intense. Sure, it's cloned everywhere, but that does not mean it's not a good ride. Honestly, it is one of the best B&M inverts out there, this model, just because it is so intense. None of the other B&M invert models are able to keep this kind of consistent intensity throughout the entire ride, and Batman always delivers in that department. Whether you're in the front row, back row, you're guaranteed to feel that tingling sensation in your legs or even gray out, especially when it's running super fast on like a hot summer day or later on in the day once it's had time to warm up. This ride is just fantastic. I've always been a huge fan of Batman. Moving on to number 5, controversial coaster, Green Lantern. I've always been a huge fan of this ride, and whenever it does wind up closing, I personally will be one of the few that is upset about it. I have always thought, or at least not always, I've thought for the past couple of years though, that when you can figure out a way where your legs are not having that much force exerted on them, you can kind of push it more to your rear and put it on the bicycle seat. That way your legs don't go numb. And if you can get your head in a certain position where you're not going to get head banging, it is a fantastic ride. If this ride had sit-down seats, I think everybody would absolutely love it. The layout is so good, much better than Medusa's layout in my opinion. There's airtime on this ride. If you know where to look for it and you know where to sit, you will find it. My personal favorite seat on this ride is the back row left edge, because there's quite a few little transitions here and there where you will get popped up out of your seat, which is very reminiscent of B&M's new surf coaster model, which is the new stand-up. And on Pipeline, there's plenty of airtime moments. That's what it's all about, basically. And Green Lantern is the only stand-up coaster I have been on that has airtime moments baked into it. There's a couple elements here and there where if you're kind of letting yourself stand a little loose and you can pop around a little bit, you will feel those uplifting forces. And it's really surprising. That twisted hill before the mid-course, the banking into the mid-course, the drop off the mid-course, all of that just throws you out of your seat. Not to mention the fact that the rest of the ride is super intense. Definitely more intense than Medusa, in my opinion, in the positive G department. The inversions are great. The ride tracks very well. I'm not a huge fan of the way the queue is set up because it's very hard to ride it over and over or even just ride it once because the station is so far away from the entrance. But like I said, whenever this ride does eventually get removed, I will be pretty upset. Go ride it, give it another chance, try the back row left edge. Maybe you'll agree with me before it's too late. Now we break into the big four, and I want to preface that 4 through 2, all 3 of those coasters are pretty interchangeable for me. They kind of bump up and down all the time, but this is the way I see it as of this season with the way they're running, and all 3 of these coasters are running phenomenal this year. Starting off with number 4, which is Nitro, and like I said, Nitro is running fantastic this year, but the other 2 are just running that much better. Especially when you get a ride in on Nitro's D train, the brand new one. It is so good. My favorite seat is the back row right edge because you're going to get a lot of weird lateral forces on some of those elements, especially going into the mid-course brake run. You get this weird sensation with the heart lining where you kind of pop up. Same thing with the 2 twisted airtime hills, where if you let yourself kind of go limp a little bit, you will get thrown out to the right, which is an awesome sensation. Nitro's just been running so good. The airtime is powerful. The trims are not hitting that hard either, so you're getting some great airtime on that return run. Overall, Nitro, definitely one of the better B&M hyper coasters, and it's proven itself to get better and better as time goes on. Moving on to number 3, we have Jersey Devil. This is a ride that's been very polarizing for the past couple of years in its very short life, but I think this year it continues to prove itself to get better with age. It actually feels a lot smoother this year than it did last year for whatever reason. It's running super fast. You're getting great airtime on all of the elements. Whether you're in the very front row or very back row, you're going to get a great ride. I still prefer the very back row, mainly for that incredible first drop and all the other drops you get off, like the turnaround, as well as some of the other elements. Just great out forces all around. It's not very strong in the positive G department per se, but the airtime is definitely where this ride reigns supreme, and the restraints are nice because the over-the-shoulder straps, they're loose enough where if you push up against them through an airtime moment, you will push them up and you will come up out of your seat. It's a really great sensation. So overall, Jersey Devil still holds up as one of the best coasters in the park, but not quite in the top 2. I think you all know what the top 2 are. And number 2 is Kingda Ka. I absolutely adore this ride. I rode it 41 times in a row just a few weeks ago, so that should tell you everything you need to know about my opinions on Kingda Ka. It is such a rush of adrenaline. There's, at this point now, nothing else like it in the world since Dragster is gone, basically. Top Thrill 2 is a very different experience. There's no other hydraulic launch that can do what this ride does and then rise up as high as it does. The airtime you get on that top hat can be absolutely mind-blowing. Recently, I was able to get a rollback, 2 rollbacks on Kingda Ka, and that just elevates my opinion of the ride even more, especially given that I was in the front row. When you're in the front row on a rollback, you're rising to the peak of the top hat higher than everyone else in the train. So when you do come back, you get launched up out of your seat as you twist down. It is such a great sensation, but even rollbacks aside, the ride is great. That camelback at the end throws you out of your seat. You get some great floater airtime. The rush of adrenaline on this ride is incredible, and I really hope it sticks around for the long run. We'll have to wait and see. A year from now, this could be a very different conversation we're having, but Kingda Ka, as it stands right now, is just a fantastic ride, a true icon to Great Adventure. And while it may be the most iconic and most popular, well, maybe most popular, it is not the best because number 1, as you all know, is El Toro. This ride always, every year, surprises me by just how consistent it is. It does have its rough patches here and there, particularly that second valley after the first airtime hill where the picture is. That really needs to be addressed. It definitely beats you up a little bit there. But if you're in a non-wheeled seat or even a back wheel seat, you're going to have a great ride on this thing. It's super intense. The airtime is mind-blowing. What else is there to say? It's El Toro. You all know. You've been on it a million times just like me, hopefully. It's a great, great ride. And that does it for my 2024 ranking of all the coasters at Six Flags Great Adventure. Like I said, next year, definitely going to be a bit of a different ranking for a variety of reasons. Flash will be here along with a couple other things changing around. So I hope you guys enjoyed this version of my rankings. If you agreed, disagreed, have any comments on the way I rank things, leave them down in the comments. Of course, remember, this is not a fact. These are just my opinions. I'm sure everyone else has very different opinions than I do on the way you rank these coasters. So let me know what your ranking is down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye, guys.